Okay, well, up until now, what we have been doing is just applying a low-pass filter to a step input, to a signal that steps up from 0 to 1. And it's interesting, and it gives you some interesting clues as to how the filter behaves. But just for shits and giggles, take a look at how it behaves if you have an actual signal that is randomly generated. So the signal here is it starts with a random number, and then it makes a random step up or down, and this is how this random curve is being created. And I'm applying a low-pass filter to this. I have set everything up already in the background. So what we have here is the adoption rate, and we can play around with it. So right now it's 100%, so it's identical to the original signal, but just change that to, let's say, 80%. And you can see that this green dotted line starts to deviate from the curve. It's not quite obvious. 80% is a very high adoption rate, so it's almost identical to the input signal. But let's keep tweaking this further to like 50%, and you'll see that it starts to smoothen out a bit. The peaks are not as high, the valleys are not as low, and it starts to gradually flatten out this curve. So let's see what happens if you gradually decrease the adoption rate and thereby increase the filter's ability to filter out the high frequency content and to allow the low frequency content to pass. So let's put this to 40. And you can see, yeah, it gets smoother still. 30%. Now we are getting to a range where an actual filter would work properly. Like normally they are somewhere. If you're using a high frame rate, your filters normally filter out just a fraction of a percent usually. So 20%. Smoother even still, and that's something that you can probably see. The curve is no longer peaky. It's actually roundish, and it loses all these peaks and valleys, and it just keeps this. It keeps the general shape. So you can see the input signal is in a valley here, and that is also present in the output signal. So the long, huge valley, that is still present. It's just these small and tiny valleys, they are being filtered out. That's why it's called a low pass filter, because it allows the low frequency, this giant wave, it allows that to pass. It's still in the signal, but these small ups and downs, they get filtered out. You might as well call it a high block filter, as would be the equivalent. So let's crank it up to like 10% of an adoption rate, and it's smoother still. And now what you might also be observing is the blue input curve has its valley, I would call it, somewhere around here, whereas the output curve gets its valley somewhere around here. That's the lowest point. So if you look at it, and then the higher you crank up this number, let's put it up to 5%, you'll see that there is a shift in, yeah, it's a latency. The original signal, it goes down and it goes up, and the original signal is already on the way up, while the output signal is still in the valley down here. So there's a time shift occurring. So the output signal is shifted in time relative to the input signal. You should be aware of this. You will increase latency by using a low pass filter just inevitably, but it's not that much, and so you have to tweak the filters in a way so that both effects kind of are still bearable. So maybe go to 3%. And you see the curve flattens and flattens even more. So now we are filtering out even those frequencies that make up this little valley. So 2% flatter still, and you get the idea of what happens at 1%. It's almost non-existent, and if the adoption rate is 0%, well, it doesn't adopt anything. It will just be a flat line. So this is the starting value. It'll never change that. So it doesn't make sense to set it to 0%. Put it back to like 5%, looks good. So this is the idea you're supposed to be getting from a low pass filter. Yeah, anything else in the next video?